This magical green liquid is a wondrous substance. With just a press of a button, the liquid is transported into the snowmaking machine, producing an endless stream of snowflakes even in scorching summer temperatures. The curious investor had never seen anything like it and, despite the objections of ski resort owner Franz, he approached for a closer look. As he took a step forward, Franz activated the blood pressure switch, instantly spraying the investor's faces with the green gas. The investor fell to his knees with a pained expression as the green gas began to invade his body, causing him to vomit a green gooey mess. Unbeknownst to Franz, the snowmaking device he had so carefully developed contained a deadly virus. Once humans came into contact with it, they would turn into bloodthirsty zombies. In order to secure the investor's investment, Franz forced the demonstration of the entire snowmaking process, despite the investor's discomfort. Afterwards, he sent the investor to the bar at the ski resort, hoping to take the opportunity to get him to sign an investment contract. However, the investors had already lost their senses and became violently aggressive. They have no choice but to leave their investors out to dry. Shortly thereafter, the investor turned into a zombie and his face was covered in pustules. He stumbles onto the dance floor and the woman is still dancing with him before being bitten the next second. Franz, observing the condition of the investors, called his assistant over to quickly sign the contract. "I didn't expect to be bitten by the investor even after the assistant had just walked up." Franz froze in disbelief. Unbeknownst to many, everyone inside the dance floor had already turned into zombies, until the shopkeeper Rita rang the bell. Meanwhile, outside the bar, Steve was preparing to meet up with his girlfriend Branka and their companions. However, he unexpectedly collided with a zombie. Looking at the other man with his teeth bared, Steve felt something was wrong. Acting on instinct, Steve grabbed a metal tray and shoved it into the zombie's mouth, only to find the tray bitten off like tofu in an instant. Steve felt a sense of bewilderment, and as he turned around, he realized more zombies had surrounded him. Steve quickly ran into the bar and closed the door behind him, only to find that there were even more zombies inside. A zombie lunged at Steve, attempting to bite him, but he forcefully pushed it away, unintentionally tearing off its arm. Steve used the severed limb to strike down another approaching zombie and then leaped over the bar counter. Just as he caught his breath, a zombie grabbed him from behind. Fortunately, Steve reacted swiftly and knocked the zombie down with his head. At that moment, a drunken man, oblivious to what was happening, casually mingled with the zombies until he found himself surrounded. It was too late for him to escape. Seizing the opportunity, Steve quickly hid in the restroom. However, as soon as he closed the door, zombie caught up and was about to break in. Steve heard Branka's voice, but he couldn't tell which stall she was in. He kicked open a random door, only to find a stranger inside. Steve joined the stranger in the stall, but they realized that Steve had kicked the door so hard that it was now broken. The zombie had reached them. In a panic, the man froze in fear. In the nick of time, Branka from next door saved Steve's life, leaving the poor man to be torn apart by the zombies on the spot. Seizing this opportunity, the trio fled the cubicle, using the confusion as a distraction. However, as they were about to leave the restroom, they were blocked by a group of zombies, with more closing in from behind. In their moment of despair, a door suddenly opened in the ceiling, killing one of the zombies in the process. It was the barmaid, who lowered a ladder and managed to save all three of them. And Franz, the culprit, is hiding here too. They began discussing what had happened, with some speculating it was rabies and others suggesting alcohol poisoning. Only Steve realizes that this is the zombie virus from the movie. Upon realizing this, Josh immediately called for help, but his conversation sounded more like casual banter with his companions. The bewildered group was left speechless. Branka intended to call the police, but Franz took the phone and offered to call and said the police could not be reached. They all suspected that the virus might have spread to the foothills, leaving them with no choice but to rely on themselves. Fortunately, Franz had a sled, but it was surrounded by zombies. Steve looked at the nearby billboard and instantly came up with a plan. They took cover behind the billboard and slowly made their way towards their destination. Although they successfully evaded the zombies in front of them, they failed to notice the ones behind. However, in the next second, the zombies slipped and fell on the icy ground. Just as they were celebrating, they realized that the billboard had also slipped away. They immediately panicked and also fell because the ground was too slippery, forcing the whole group to split up in a panic. Josh and Rita returned the way they came, while Franz took Steve on the sled, successfully escaping. However, shortly after riding out, they collided with a mutated deer. Fortunately, They were unharmed, but as they were getting up, Franz kicked Steve to the ground. It turned out that Franz knew the zombie virus was related to the green liquid he had developed, so he couldn't let the secret be revealed. He hadn't made a phone call for help in the attic either. Franz silently approached the sled, picked up a shovel from the ground, and Steve and the Branca realized the danger. Franz was going to kill them to keep the secret hidden. They quickly got up and ran towards the forest. Franz couldn't catch up and cursed in place, turning his gaze to the zombie deer stuck in the tracks. He stepped on the accelerator without hesitation. Unexpectedly, as Franz turned around, 2 more zombie deer appeared behind him. Meanwhile, Steve and the Branca planned to walk down the mountain to seek help. They made a torch out of a scarf. However, shortly after they set off, Steve accidentally stepped on a trap. Fortunately, he was wearing ski boots. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Just as Steve was about to free himself from the trap, a zombie suddenly appeared, and another one emerged behind them, surrounding them. It seemed like their end was near. However, the zombies suddenly stopped attacking. At that moment, Steve heard his phone ringing. It was a call from his mother. They instantly realized that music could make the zombies stop moving. Taking advantage of this weakness, Steve quickly freed himself from the trap. They had a narrow escape and planned to return to the bar to rescue Josh and Rita, but they didn't know that Josh had been bitten by a zombie earlier, and before he mutated, Josh wanted Rita to kill him.
1, 2, what the fuck?
Facing the mistake, Rita could only apologize continuously, but soon Josh lost consciousness. Rita knew that Josh was about to mutate, but she couldn't bring herself to do it, so she silently left. Later, Rita arrived at the basement of the bar, which was her late husband's storage room. There were many treasures left from World War II, and now they could finally come in handy. Meanwhile, Steve and the Branca also arrived at the bar, only to see hordes of zombies standing still and swaying to the music on the dance floor. It seemed that their earlier speculation was correct, so they went to the warehouse to grab some tools to kill the zombies. But just as they were about to take action, Rita rushed out from the basement, carrying a heavy machine gun in her hands. Without a second thought, Rita started shooting.
Rita! Don't!
Move!
But to their surprise, every zombie remained unharmed, and instead, the entire bar was left in ruins. A broken candle quickly ignited the alcohol on the bar counter, and adjacent to it was the liquor storage room. They quickly ran outside upon realizing the situation. After a fierce explosion, the entire bar vanished in an instant, but luckily, they all survived. Without the control of the music, the zombies became extremely aggressive and soon surrounded them. Faced with a desperate situation, they had no choice but to fight for their lives. Fortunately, Josh and Branca were skilled skiers. The two put on their skis and maneuvered through the zombie crowd, killing many zombies with their superb skiing skills. Meanwhile, Rita brought out a snowplow from the warehouse. She turned the snowplow into a meat grinder, easily dealing with the remaining zombies. Just as Steve was rejoicing, he noticed the mutated Franz approaching Branca. Branca was terrified and paralyzed on the ground, while the zombie Franz was closing in step by step. Branca tried to resist with an iron rod, but it was futile. Seeing Branca in danger, Steve was extremely anxious and grabbed a nearby power cable. Throwing it to Rita, Rita instantly understood and started the snowplow. Steve used the power cable to slide towards Branca, and at the crucial moment, he saved her, but Steve also fell along with Franz into the building below. Although Steve luckily grabbed onto a rope, but below was a massive fan, and if he fell, it would tear him apart. The zombie also tightly held onto Steve's snowboard. As the rope is about to break, Branca grabs Steve's hand just in time, but Branca can't hold on for long. Steve saw the situation and took the iron rod from Branca's hand at the last moment, and he removed his snowboard. The zombie Franz was thus ground to a pulp, and Steve managed to get pulled up by Branca, although they all escaped with a shocking escape. It didn't end there, for there was still a long way to go down the mountain.